Hello guys and welcome back. Today we are going to be talking about the knee joint. Now the knee joint is an area in Capoeira where we see a lot of people injure themselves and sometimes we don't know exactly what happened. Often we're just simply blaming our age or blaming something else that we don't have control over. But the fact of the matter is that we do have control over it. Now for our knee joint, it's very important to understand that most times when pain is felt related to our movements in Capoeira, it's most often not the knee's fault. The knee is kind of that joint that's stuck in the middle between our hip and our ankle. And depending on how our hip and our ankle are placing our femur bone, so our leg bone, it will determine whether we're putting our knee joint at a mechanical disadvantage and then eventually perhaps put it into a risk injury mechanism. So let's look a little bit at the different positions here. So we're going to be talking about the ginga and how we could place our hips to make sure that we are effective. Now if we break down the ginga is essentially two positions that we find in the normal fitness realm. The first one being a squat position and the second one being a lunge position, right? I place myself here, I'm at the bottom, I'm at the one side of my ginga here. I switch, I place my legs in a base position, solid base position here, and then I switch again to the other side, back into a lunge position. In the squatting position, one side more so the lunge, and in the middle, back to my squat position. So when we're preparing ourselves and when we're balancing from side to side, it's important to look at those mechanics. Now let's look at the first image here. We got someone that we call having the knees buckle in a little bit more on the inside. So if we look at the knee joint here and we trace just a little line, it goes within our big toe. That's going to be important to understand because if I'm in the position here and my knees are slightly collapsing here, it could be very, very, very subtle as I'm transitioning, as I'm playing, but here I'm at a mechanical disadvantage, meaning that if my knees are more so inside as I trace that line of my big toe, it means that my hip muscles or my glutes are not firing up. My glutes will externally rotate my femur, so putting my bone outwards, creating a little bit of torque, and torque means more stability. If I let go, I can do the movement and I won't necessarily feel the pain right now, but with time, all that energy, that kinetic chain from my hip down the chain is going to target the inside of my knee here, making me a lot more vulnerable while I'm playing. Right, so that's one thing. The other thing that we want to look at is when we are doing our ginga, this will be close to ideal where if we stop and break into that base or parallel position, we want to make sure that the knees are aligned with the midfoot. So if we look at that carefully, I place myself here, I can stop and just simply look at my knees. I draw a straight line, second or third toe alignment, we're in business, right? So we're trying to avoid this. Even if I open up my stance quite big, it can even put me at a fault right here. So I have to make sure that if I'm in more of a sumo stance or I'm playing large here in my game, if my knees are here, that means the backside is not firing up. That means that mechanically it's going to be a lot harder to attack or be stabilized if someone wants to take me down. So make sure if we are in a wider stance to push those knees out, right? We might feel it work a little bit behind us, but that's exactly the point. Now, the third picture here has us going the opposite. So the knee joint is more aligned with our pinky toe. So I would say that the last two pictures, this one and this one, are what we're going to strive for. So what do I mean by that? If my knees are aligned over the mid part of my toes or my feet, that's good. That means that mechanically, structurally, everything is building upon each other like a nice pillar of a big building. The third one, I have my knees going more to the outside, to my pinky toe. There's nothing wrong with that here. I'm putting a little bit more strain to the side, but the side here can sustain it. And what I'm doing is I'm just creating more torque. So in position where I need to, I can open up here and I'll be able to move quicker, to explode a lot quicker with my movement, because all of that energy will be charged up in the hips. If the knees are collapsing here, it's a lot harder to push against a bent knee. But if I'm focusing and opening up more, then I'll be a lot more stable on that kick. Now the other position that we mentioned is the lunge position. Now, if we look at the base, the in-between of our Ginga, after we do the base or the parallel movement, we bring one leg back. And another thing that the knee really likes, instead of as adding upon to being aligned with our toes, the mid portion or the pinky toe, is to be at 90 degrees or more. If we go beyond 90 degrees, so often a parallel position is under 90 degrees of my knee joint. Therefore, I can be at a mechanical disadvantage. What do I mean by that is the force exerted on my knee joint, the lower I go, once I reach 90 degrees or more going down, I put an excessive amount of shear force here going in two opposite directions on that joint. And that can be very, very rough. Now, Capoeira has us going into these deep movements, so we just got to be smart about it. If I need to go down into a deep squat, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that I'm pushing those knees out. I'm not going to let them cave in, because now I'm going to go beyond 90 degrees and caving in, putting a lot of stress on that knee. So if we need to go there, push those knees out. Work it in your training nice and slowly. The other thing, if I find myself in a negativa position of some sort, right, where I'm on the ground, I'll place myself in this position. This is hyperflexion, so a lot of pressure on my knee joint, but reviewing my torque in my elbow, in my shoulder, I'm sustaining most of the weight on my hand. So this leg that's in hyperflexion of the knee is protected by the hand that's pushing against the ground, leaving a lot of less stress on my knees. So I hope that this insight on how the knees move helped you, gave you a few cues to switch up your training, or just to adjust a little bit how you're going to move. Start with the Ginga, start with basic movements, just adjusting yourself, go into those positions, go to the deep positions to see if you're protecting it or not. Slowly think about it, and eventually you won't have to think about it, because you'll be so used to you doing it the new way or this optimal way, and you'll be a lot more effective in your game. So if you have any questions, write them down. If you have any comments as well or suggestions, I will look at everything and base my future videos on that. So thank you very much, and let's clean up those knees and avoid those knee issues that we see too often. Thanks again for watching, guys.